Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Mickey 17.
Yes.
After a bit of an absence. The last film we did was The Brutalist.
Yes.
Which we went to London to see, and that's a couple of months ago or more now.
Yes.
End of January, I think.
Yes.
So
it's me. I haven't been feeling well, really.
It's all your fault. Blame Jose. I've had nothing to do with it, obviously.
You did cancel a couple of times, so it's not entirely my fault. But it has been kind of mainly me, I think.
But I was looking forward to getting back to the cinema, and I was looking forward to this film in particular. So it's a sci-fi comedy written and directed by Bong Joon Ho, who is very well known these days in Western cinema. He's Korean. Then he made Parasite, which won Best Picture. I think he won Best Director as well for that.
I'm not sure, but yeah, it was one of the films of the year for sure.
Let me just double check that for us. Yeah, Parasite won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay. It was the first non-English language film to win Best Picture. It also won the Palme d'Or. He also made Snowpiercer, which I think we've both seen, which I really love that film. There's a great video essay about how it's secretly a sequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which I love. It's one of these fan dudes. Anyway,
passed me by.
Quite apart from that, it's a really good film. He also made Memories of Murder, which is very highly regarded. That's 22 years ago now. The Host, Mother, not the one with Javier Bardem and
Jennifer Lawrence.
Okja, I'm not sure how it's said. And he has a great reputation. And so, we're really looking forward to this. It's got Robert Pattinson in it, who is an actor who, since becoming massive in Twilight, has made loads of really interesting decisions about the movies he makes, the people he works with.
Yes.
This is yet another one.
Yes. Yes, he's worked with Claire Denis and David Cronenberg, and I suppose he's made a choice of choosing films by auteurs, which has served them very well. He did The Lighthouse. Yeah. Right. So I still have reservations about him, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on the film, because I actually think that he's a problem in it.
Okay, so we'll quickly say what it's about. It's set in sort of near future. I think 2050 something is the year we're given. And a device has been invented that can turn all sorts of shite from the sewers, including dead human bodies and waste, into a brand new human. It can print out humans.
It's like a 3D printer, but for humans.
Yeah. And it's controversial technology and everything, and it's outlawed on Earth. But a politician played by Mark Ruffalo, who, as is the case in a lot of films these days, is a very Trump-coded politician.
He's this odd combination of Trump and Musk. He's both. Yeah.
He kind of petitions for this technology to be allowed outside Earth, where it can be tested. And so he wants to launch a colony-seeking expedition to this icy planet, and they'll allow they'll call it an expendable, which is a person who can be killed for experimental purposes, and then reprinted, and their memories will be downloaded each time, so they have a constantly updating record of who they are. They know who they are, They're not just fresh every time. And that's the Robert Pattinson character, who's kind of driven into doing this kind of desperately, because he's in hock with mafia, some mob. So
they're about to chop his limbs when he decides to become this experiment.
Yes, they're going to segment him. So he goes, "I'll get off Earth, please." And what we see is the 17th... We see a bunch, but we start off seeing Mickey 17. He's the 17th version of Mickey. So he's been killed 16 times previously, and we see a bunch of ways in which he's been killed. Mickey 17 is left to die on this icy planet, which the colonists have just landed on. Some big native fauna, kind of giant bug-type creatures. There's a lot of Starship Troopers, I think, in this. Similar kind of creatures are descending upon him, and he's left, it is assumed, to die. And they'll print out a new one, and they'll go on. But he doesn't die. The creatures, they pick him up and they put him back on Earth. They're not interested in eating him. And he finds his way back to the colony. And now there's two of them. And that's a big no-no. And so Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 have to work out what's going to happen. And they also, one of the interesting things is they fight each other. We're told, there's a lot of voiceover. And one of the things that we're told is amongst the various things that are saved and kind of copied into the new printed out personality is. But personality clearly varies wildly. Mickey 17 is a nervous wreck all the time, and Mickey 18 is homicidally confident. And that's one of the ways in which, one of the sources of comedy in the film. So you say that Pattinson's performance is an issue. It's clearly, it's really broad, and I think he's, it's clearly, he clearly shows the range that he can do one thing and the other. But what's your issue with him?
I think he's made really interesting choices until now, and it just occurred to me watching this film that in none of the choices did he ever exhibit warmth, except maybe for the Twilight movie. Yeah, but in all the rest of the films, he never engages the audience with warmth. Yeah. They're cerebral films, right? And he's technically very good. In this film, you can tell Mickey 17 from Mickey 18. You can tell the difference between them.
Yeah, without having to have the numbers written on them in lipstick.
Exactly. But he's not warm, and which means that actually you never really empathize with him very much, I don't think. Right? I mean, I think, he is a character, particularly Mickey 17, that you need to be inside his head and love. And I didn't feel that. I thought it was all externals, the character.
I know what you mean, actually. The one time I think I probably felt for him to some extent was when he realises that Mickey 18 is going to go off with his girlfriend.
Yes.
Which, I mean, has been his girlfriend through a bunch of previous Mickey iterations. But now that there's a new Mickey 18, and so he's distraught by that and upset and everything. And I got that.
I got that, but I got that from the plot.
Yeah.
Rather than from him. Right? So, he's clearly a man in love. He's besotted. You do feel for him. Right? But, you still feel that you don't really know who he is. You don't know what's going on in his head. That, I mean, I suppose, part of being a big star is that, the stars exhibit warmth. I mean, even Harrison Ford, who always plays ornery, right? Like, you love him, don't you? Like, yeah, kind of. That's part of his warmth. That's part of, kind of the multi-dimensional character that he exhibits. Whereas I just don't feel that with Pattinson. It's all externals.
I think I sort of know what you mean. And you wonder whether, I mean, has he had a huge starring role outside of Twilight?
Batman, which is also...
He's the new Batman.
You see, in Batman also, it is meant to be this character who's secretive and, Bruce Wayne is not expected to, convey warmth, right? Because, he's traumatized by his past and he's an orphan and he's a psychopath, basically. So I thought he worked very well in that character. Yeah.
And he has that scene, it's a wonderful scene in the Batman where he doesn't connect with Catwoman, where they're about to. I remember, I don't think we really mentioned it when we did that podcast, but I've thought about it a lot since, which is, it's all bathed in this orange light. I mean, that film is so beautifully lit. And they're getting closer and closer. I think they're in her apartment. And just as they're about to I think they're about to kiss, he opens up this device, which is like some earpiece that he's going to give her for some whatever thing they're doing. And that's blue light. And it kind of, that change in lighting kills the scene. Do you know what I mean? It imposes. And it's like, and I think he's the one who gets that device out. It's like he refuses to connect. It's in him that he can't. Anyway.
But you see, in that film, and very interesting and maybe paradoxically, the warmth is conveyed by Zoe Kravitz.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, who is equally traumatized and, and she gives this fantastic performance. She's very sexy and so on. But also she's warm, kind of, why she's feeling what she's feeling, and they're all kind of relatable feelings, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with Pattinson, I mean, it might be my feeling, but I just don't.
I think warmth is not something the film is going for in its slight defence. I think it's not that it's failing to do that. I don't think it's trying to. But it might be better if it did try to and go for it. But it is definitely going for broad comedy in the way that the two Mickeys, the two main Mickeys, are performed, characterised, written.
Yes, I heard you and Jen laugh throughout.
I laughed a bunch of times.
Yeah, I did find it funny, but I didn't find it as funny as you did. I don't think.
No, I don't think so. But what I would say is that I didn't really like the film much overall.
Okay.
I did have kind of fundamental issue. Fundamentally, I got bored at points. I mean, there's a scene towards the end, and we'll get into spoiler territory, of course. There's a scene towards the end where it's all starting to kind of come together, and the bugs are outside congregating. We're in that kind of furnace room. The bugs being lowered over the furnace, and it's very threatening. And we've got all the kind of good guys who are trying to do the right thing. They understand the bugs and whatever. And then you've got the bad guys, which is the politician and his wife, played by Toni Collette, threatening all sorts of things. And there's so much fucking dialogue in this scene that, like, I mean, I love good dialogue in movies. Obviously, everyone does, but when it's just, it's so functional. It's very badly written. It's, Bong Joon Ho, obviously his native language is not English, and I wonder how much help he might have had in the script. But be that as it may, I just think it's so dry and so long, and there's so much information being got at. It's like we've invented a translator, and we want to kill the bug, and the bugs are gathering, and actually we're the aliens on this planet, and there's just so many things being hit for a long time. I'm going, fucking hell, this is just talking. It really slowed down for me. I was getting quite, annoyed by it. I was going, and then some action comes back in. It does start to pick up when you go out into the bug world, but still, I thought this is. I think the film really kind of lacked pace for something that from the trailer was so energetic looking.
I think so too. And so it's interesting because the black humor really worked with me at the beginning, right? And then it began to really not work on me. It just was too obvious.
Yeah.
And then the film somehow forgot about it altogether, right? Because somewhere in the first third of the film, it stops making those black jokes, right? And things become real and serious, yeah.
That's probably around the point that Mickey 17 stays alive, because what we have is a kind of cold open set around the time he's about to die, and then we go through this whole history of how the cloning happened, or the printing happens, and Mickey's various iterations, and the life on the ship and all this. And that's kind of, I mean, it's quite a lengthy segment, but it's also, you're jumping through time and it's hitting the kind of funny beats or the interesting beats. And I think that's where a lot of those jokes are coming. Like, we see repeated printings of Mickey, and the people doing them become less careless, or become more careless. So, they start off like, as he prints out, he's supposed to go on this kind of bench that catches him, and they forget to put the bench there, and he just falls out, and it's a very funny image, and it does that a couple of times. Things like that. There are lots of little jokes, little bits of business that do work for me, and I think those are the things that I was laughing at. Like, so, and even when the film was in its kind of duller moments, it would still have that capacity to have a joke like that. But I think once you get to the body of the story, which is, okay, Mickey 17 has not died as he's supposed to, and now we'll see what happens. That, I think, is where it slows down, because that kind of montage energy is lost at that point.
Yes, I thought it was interesting that Mickey 17 is kind of not very bright, right? And that, I think, is conveyed very well. The sex scenes are handled very badly, I think. Yeah, kind of. And he, because, I mean, he is one of the great sex symbols of the 2010s or whatever the years the Twilight films were.
It's about then, yeah.
Right. And so I think he's used very badly in that respect, right? Because, I mean, you never feel when watching it that, he is hot, really. Yeah. And also, you never feel what the heat between,
he and his girlfriend
is.
Naomi Aki, I think, is his girlfriend.
So, I mean, the film tells you that they're hot for each other, but it never makes you feel it.
No, I do agree with that as well.
So, and, that whole threesome thing, I thought was completely bungled when she's in bed with Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. I mean, that had great potential for all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like the film is very reticent to make anything sexy, right? Which, is a problem in cinema.
I think it also, well, I mean, that's just so common these days. I mean, like, nothing's as sexy as it should be anymore.
Well, I don't know about that.
I think
but certainly the sex that people talk about is the stuff on TV and not in movies, where it should be a really, kind of TV film by virtue of just, a larger screen and more attention and so on, has greater potential, for that, for encouraging that. But, lately, as you say, it really hasn't been the case very much.
To go along with this, I think that, generally speaking, I think the camera's used very badly. Well, not very badly, but it's not used in an inspiringly interesting way. It's pretty functional. I mean, Bong Joon Ho does have a kind of a visual sensibility that you can kind of identify. There's certainly a lot of
definitely does, yeah.
planimetric shots, and he does have an eye for a composition, but nothing really stands out as there are very few compositions that stand out as striking or interesting or evocative or effective, really. I didn't think in this film. It seemed pretty functional, despite the fact you were pointing out it's $118 million budget. Money has been spent on this. There's a huge amount of visual effects.
Yes. I didn't like the production design because, I came out thinking, it's one of those metallic grey films. Yeah, and when you think, I don't understand this with filmmakers, and it must be a thing with color grading choices, and what you give up to make particular choices. But I just hate that look in films. Yeah, it is like the whole world seems like bathed in this metallic gray light. When you think of the different opportunities that's presented, from Earth, yeah, the inside of the spaceship, the new world, right? Like, they can't all be metallic gray, right? And yet that is kind of what you come away with, really. And the last thing that I really hated, which is on a different plane, really, because, it's about narrative, but I thought the ending was completely bungled and kind of betrayed the film, right? So, it's bungled because it seems to go on forever, unnecessarily, I think.
Including a dream sequence, which is... I didn't see the point. I so rarely do with dream sequences, but...
Yeah. I mean, this was, particularly weak. And it seems to want to tie up every loose piece, in the thing. It contradicts itself. I thought there was something wrong about, the young woman scientist, whose whole performance and character is a joke. But, when she's holding up the bug, and petting it like a little baby.
In the crowd scene.
In the crowd scene. You think, well, the whole point of the film is that this is a species that's intelligent and that speaks and, that can act and can make jokes. And you're reducing it to a pet.
Yeah.
Right? So...
Although, in fairness, we are told those little ones are the babies, and she's treating it as a baby, I suppose. But I kind of see what you mean.
It felt off. I mean, either it's a new species, or they're your pets, because she is cradling it like a baby, but she's also petting it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the film possibly was going for a kind of, okay, they are our friends now, we understand each other. But had it been doing that more kind of full-throatedly, it would have had lots of bugs there.
Exactly.
It would have been a shared scene.
And the mother bug would have been nearby, like looking after her baby. I mean...
Yeah. Especially because the point was they gave the baby back.
Exactly. So, I do think... Anyway, that's a minor part of why I think the end is bungled, right? But that was just one of the things that stood out for me. The most egregious things are that it's unnecessary, that it goes on forever and ever and ever, and that it is a complete betrayal of the initial tone.
Okay, so go on.
Well, and the initial tone is meant to be very dark and funny, kind of life sucks and you suffer and die and kind of it's a joke. And at the end, it kind of, punches you in the face with grotesque sentimentality.
Yeah. Life is valuable, actually, and we should all treasure it.
Yeah, and we should treasure each other, and and everything has a happy ending, and you could just join this committee and overturn a government and overturn the planet, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does have this thing of Bong Joon Ho as well, particularly in Parasite, but throughout his films, is well known for the kind of strain of social satire.
Yeah.
I know, from what I vaguely am given to understand, because I don't know this kind of in any particular detail, but I think South Korea has one of the most inequitable, unequal societies on earth. Rich versus poor, and which is why a lot of this stuff comes from South Korea. Squid Game is a huge one as well, which is not Bong Joon Ho, but it's a similar.
Yeah, I love Squid Game. The first Squid Game.
Yeah.
I couldn't get through the second.
And that's this kind of writ large sort of satire, again based on the inequality in South Korean society. But Parasite and Snowpiercer were readable everywhere. This isn't like you had to know this about South Korea in particular. Everywhere can recognise this in their own societies. And you see, again, it's as you said, obvious, and it's kind of writ large. You see this satire in the basis of this film as well. The cheapness of life, the way in which this character sells his life repeatedly, and that sort of thing.
So you reference Squid Game, but you see that in his other films. Yeah, Snowpiercer is all about that. Like kind of. There's the rich people in the front, and kind of everybody just kind of subsisting in the back, and kind of slaves really. And there's a class basis to Parasite, right? But I think in those other films, the tone is more controlled, right? Whereas this ending with like beginning with pitch black humor, and ending in kind of over sentimentality, it really jars.
Well, Parasite kind of wound up in this really dark. It started off in a dark place and wound up in a dark place, and it felt like completely coherent. Snowpiercer had this kind of progression to a victory, but it was a victory that was based on a kind of breaking of the system. There's a video essay that talks about the left to right direction that film shot in. You start at the back of the train on the left and move gradually to the right towards the front, and then the kind of the ultimate victory isn't in reaching the front; it's in going out of the door at the side and just moving like to the back of the frame. Right. You go in a perpendicular direction and you change the geography of where. It's a really interesting way of kind of constructing that victory, as it were. Here, you have neither. You start off in a dark place, you end in a really light place, and it's giving you a Hollywood happy ending. And I don't feel that there's a satirical intent in that. It does feel earnest, and I don't buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't feel right. It does feel kind of cheap.
And also, I thought none of the relationships in the film were believable to me, and I don't think they necessarily should be, right? Like, you can imagine other types of films where you don't necessarily, where it's the stereotype that's important, farce or whatever. But in this film, like, you think, what keeps Mickey and his partner in crime from the beginning united? What's the bond between them that lasts through the film?
Yeah.
It can't just be, that they tried to set up a macaroon shop together, right? Like,
Well, Mickey certainly bears a grudge about that, doesn't he? And then when Mickey 18 is the version of Mickey who is absolutely vocal about we need to take this guy down. He betrayed us or whatever. But I do think, and the way that they both got onto the ship, they didn't go on together, right? But they happened to go on the same college. So I didn't feel that was an issue. Like, they did just happen to wind up there together from different directions.
Well, I did think it was an issue in the sense that none of the characters are recognizably human to me, right? And if they're not, then kind of you're not invested in them, and they're, you think kind of, so, the film makes a big deal out of love, that it's kind of really important that Mickey 17 loves and is loved, right? And, that the young bug, the whole community is out there to save them. And I think that there are ideas there about community and politics and political change and so on. But the individual human qualities are really not there. So, for example, the lesbian couple, right? You think, okay, isn't it great that they have like a lesbian couple? Yeah. But then actually kind of the bond between them, the affection, the desire, like that's never really communicated. And it wouldn't have taken much to do so, right? Like, things like that, bug me about the film.
An issue that I had, which seem relatively minor, but it did go to kind of the way in which I bought into the film, or failed to buy into the film maybe, is I don't think 17 Mickeys is enough. From what we see at the start of the film, right? I mean, we're told a little bit later through a bit of dialogue. I think it's about actually the lesbian couple because one dies, I think. And they say we were together for 4 years. We met on the ship 4 years ago. So this ship's been going for 4 years, and we see a lot of Mickeys dying in kind of very blasé circumstances. He experimented on. He goes and dies in various places. He dies out in space because they wanted to see how radiation affects him. He dies in multiple, having been exposed to the virus on the new planet, and they kill him repeatedly looking for a vaccine. And he says it's like Mickey's 12, 13 and 14 gave us the vaccine. So you're thinking that we've had 4 years of this. we're showing a lot of Mickeys dying in these quick and daft and silly ways. We've only had 17 Mickeys. I think we should have had like 250 Mickeys.
I think so too.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
I know that Mickey 17 is a great sounding title, but I think like Mickey 250 is good.
Yeah, if he's an expendable and he's used to test out all kinds of things, you would have expected him, to die a lot more times. It would seem and it would have made the film more affecting. He would have had memories of 200 deaths rather than like 17.
It would have made the Mickey that survives more interesting because so many have died before him, and it's such a different thing. I also think that the way that the Mickeys talk about death, or the way generally people talk about death, like people constantly go up to Mickey and ask him what's it like to die. It's spoken of as though he's got very, very used to this. And I mean, again, that's this is kind of daft, but I would say when you're only 17 Mickeys in, that's still got the kind of early stages of this. Like, I think you get to 100 Mickeys, and that's when you're going, I'm so used to this. This is just my thing. I just die all the time.
I mean, well, a couple of things to that. So, first of all, I always thought that was interesting, this thing. Everyone is interested in his experience of death. And you think that this is going to be a theme in the film, that the film is going to say something about the value of human life and the experience of death and what that might, and the film just doesn't do anything with it really. So that's one thing about the death. The other thing is that he does get used to it, right? So there's the scene with the bugs where he's just expecting to be killed, and so on. But I think the film doesn't make enough of suffering, because one of the things that we're constantly told is that he feels everything, right? So the deaths are not easy; they're painful, right? And the only thing that makes it bearable is that he knows he will live. And actually, the whole film changes tone once you have the doubles, right? And that rebirth is no longer a guarantee.
Yeah, because the rebirth has already happened, so he's supposed to die, and that will just be a death. Yeah. Mind you, so's the other one. The other one is less interested because he's so homicidal, but the nervous one is, it's different for him now.
And the film is also not very good at explaining why they both fight over life. Because I mean, let's face it, Mickey 18th is Mickey 17th. He's got his memories and so on, right? So, I think the film needed to have kind of conveyed more clearly why they both now cling to life, right? Whereas, what is the loss for Mickey 17th in no longer existing, since presumably he exists in Mickey 18th?
Yeah.
So anyway, now, in spite of saying all of this, I'm making it sound, 'cause we haven't said one good thing about it really, and I actually had a fairly good time in it. It's kind of, it's an interesting film, and I found it kind of, altogether enjoyable. I mean, I didn't look at my watch. I didn't find it as dull as you did, and it had some very interesting moments. Right, perhaps to me the most interesting was those moments when Robert Pattinson is coming out of the printer. And you have this crank, kind of this jutting motion, and then he gets put back in the machine slightly, and you get a sense of the mechanical process of it, the strain, that it is a kind of suffering as well, and vulnerability, that, the being reborn is also a painful, vulnerable element, presumably like his deaths, So I thought that was very interestingly visualized, and the sonic element was very interesting as well.
The mechanical aspect of it, the being pulled back into the printer to obviously reprint something or add a detail that it had. It was interesting to me because that is something that you get printers that do that sort of thing, and it's like that's really rang true. This is like a little observation about real mechanical devices that make, because you have seen films in which people are printed or kind of reconstructed in these ways. And it does tend to be a smooth process, even if they are playing at a kind of mechanical aspect to it. Still, that difference in the way that he moves is interesting and it's novel, and it did. You notice it every time. I did like that. There are things that I liked, but I do overall. And despite the fact that I liked lots of the jokes in it, I do overall come out feeling a little bit similar to what I did with Parasite, because I remember with Parasite I wasn't that impressed with it, and the expectation by the time I saw it, it had already won the Palme d'Or. I don't think it had won Best Picture yet, but it had this huge reputation already, and I was so looking forward to it, and I came out going like, I get it, right? Like, I mean, it's you always say, is it Richard Dyer who always said, "Don't think you're smarter than the film"?
That's Victor
Perkins. And so that that's obviously a risk, right? It's always a risk to say like, "Oh, I just got this," and there it is. But I did feel like I had got the
you were smarter.
I did not smarter, but I felt like I do understand what this film is talking about, and I got it. And I didn't feel like it was doing much with sort of quote unquote filmmaking tools to make me feel what it wanted. It's like, is this an essay or is it a narrative fiction? And I sort of in some ways feel similar with this when it comes to the satirical elements, the coding of the Trump/Musk type character, who I did kind of enjoy, and I thought I did think it was interesting to have a Trump type character who has a little bit of intelligence. I mean, he doesn't have loads, but he has a certain kind of savvy. And the thing that is really Trump about him, because although he is a kind of despot, what's really Trumpy about him is the looking for the camera all the time. Everything is for the cameras. Everything is image.
I really liked Mark Ruffalo's performance, actually.
All teeth.
And speaking of someone who does exude warmth, which actually I think in a way is very bad casting. Yeah, because Mark Ruffalo, I mean, he is warmth personified, really, even as the Hulk. So opposites, Robert Pattinson, they're meant, I think, to be exuding kind of different things.
Did you see the thing recently? You must have seen it when Trump and J.D. Vance ambushed Zelensky in the Oval Office in the White House.
Yeah, that was frightful.
And I watched it, and as kind of shocking as that whole thing was, what I really noticed was right at the end when they're all leaving, Trump says something like, "That'll make great TV."
Yeah, he did.
And
say
that is such a Trump. Like, I know immediately. I went, "Oh, that." Most people won't have emphasized it because it's not the most important thing, right? The most important thing is the attack. But that's when I went, "Oh, that is Trump all over, right?" TV. Ultimately, what he really cares about is this will have looked good on TV. This will have got the ratings.
But you see, I mean, to me, this illustrates why I feel a bit better about the film than you do, because I mean, I would qualify it as like a failure, but a really interesting one, right? Yeah, it's kind of, it has all of these ideas, it does all of these things, we're talking about Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. I like them in the film, and I liked what they were doing, and so it's a film that doesn't quite work, but then nonetheless offers a lot of interesting stuff to chew in. And for me, that's almost what you expect of a film, because not all of them are going to be great masterpieces or or superbly enjoyable or whatever. But I think the only films I really resent are, ones that feel wrote by the numbers without ideas, really. And this one, I think is...
This is not one of... This is better than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. So I recommend it on that basis, certainly.
Yeah.
But I wonder whether it's... Well, I haven't seen the reviews, so I think I get the sense, from my perspective, it might be being a little overpraised.
I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't seen the reviews either, but I'd be surprised if it had been overpraised.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, that's all I'm saying, mate. But as I haven't seen the reviews, I'm just wondering. I get the sense that I might think a little less of it than a lot of people would.
I don't know, because we're quite in sync. We usually disagree a little bit more.
Well, maybe you and I are both, the countercultural icons of our age. But no, like easy to recommend. There's a lot of worse films than this, but I don't think it's really that good either. Despite jokes that work, interesting things.
I kind of
it feels kind of trifling, more than I wanted it to be. I mean, I just wanted it to be more energetic, more funny, more dramatic. All that.
Well,
stuff.
I wanted that too, but I don't think it's trifling. Actually, I think. It's a serious intent at something with a lot of skill that doesn't quite work. It would be my way of putting it.
There are two more things I wanted to pick up on, one of which, so when we talked about Parasite, one thing that you in particular picked up on was the theme of smell. And, this came up in the last few months, because on Twitter, this woman who did a PhD at Cambridge. Did it? I forget exactly what the thing was, but it's the gist of it is ethics in the representation of olfactory senses, and basically it's to do with how smell is represented in kind of fiction. And people kind of latched onto this because they said, this sounds really fucking stupid. How can you do anything about smell? And then she was very patient with people and explained what she meant. And everyone was like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. And it reminds me of, and I think in her paper, or at least in the abstract, which was published at the time, one of the works that she referenced was Parasite. Because in Parasite there was a thing about the smell of being poor, the smell of poverty, right? You can't get rid, even if you can, because they play at being kind of slightly higher class than they are to get into this rich people's house, the piano teachers and drivers and whatnot. But no matter what they do, no matter how much they get on with the family, they can't rid themselves of the smell of poverty. They don't realise it's on them, but it just is.
Sure.
And here there was a class definitely plays a role in this film, but I think it's largely not one of its bigger themes. But there is a point early on when Mickey is reminiscing, or telling us about when he first became an expendable. The woman with the red hair who takes him through the process, he talks about her smell, the smell of her hair, and how he couldn't concentrate on anything because of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also this kind of comedy in the fact that he hadn't read any of the terms and conditions and everything. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. But there's this thing about the distraction of her hair, and there's definitely a class element to that, just in the way that she's presented and the way she speaks. And, the way she's dressed, the way she speaks, the way she has her hair, the way she's in charge compared to everything about him. It's not as fundamental as the thing in Parasite, but it's definitely there. It's clearly an interest, or clearly at least a kind of a theme that that Bong Joon Ho is kind of recognises, is open to. That was interesting to me. The other thing is there are a couple of actors in this who I did not expect to see, who I really like. So Cameron Britton is one who I recognise only from Mindhunter, the David Fincher Netflix series about the kind of
I love that series.
The FBI unit that developed profiling of serial killers in the 70s and 80s. He played Ed Kemper, who was a real serial killer, and he's the kind of key interview subject that they have in that series, and he's so intimidating and so large and all the rest of it. And here he's, he's recognisable. I did recognise him, but he's playing a very different kind of character, and it was just lovely to see him. I mean, I think you see him in that, and it's like, I can't imagine him as anything other than this terrifying serial killer. And now he's, much more kind of buffoonish and lovely and all the rest. The other one was Tim Key, who's one of my favourite comedians. He's the guy who winds up in a pigeon costume for most of it.
Oh, right, okay.
So I love him to bits. He's got one of the most interesting minds of anyone, because he always, this doesn't come across in the film because he's not improvising or anything. But if you watch his comedy, he always comes up with a different way to interpret something than you'd thought of, and it's always very funny. He's just got such an interesting play. It's impossible for him to take anything seriously. I love him, and it's so lovely to see him show up here. He's not doing the thing that he normally does, right? He does that kind of thing. He does also kind of comedy poetry, very bad poetry with beer all over the stage and stuff. But it was such a nice surprise. If you know him, it's lovely to see him, right? Otherwise, probably not makes much of an impression. But I did like him very much.
Well, the other person that we've missed, which is arguably much more important than any of those, is Stephen Yeun. Yeah, who was the lead in Minari. And I think, because he's Asian, probably hasn't been given the opportunities that other actors have. Because, he is someone actually, again, who does exude a kind of a warmth, and he's cast as a villain,
he's that rival that Mickey 18 holds the grudge against.
So I liked him very much in this film as well. All right,
that's where I would wrap it up.
Okay, I would. It's an interesting failure, so I would recommend that people see it with that in mind. It's kind of not by any means the best film of the year or anything like that, but worth seeing. So thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, for what it's worth at the minute still, at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.